morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to reconvene the 30th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. I'd like to indicate that this public hearing is being broadcast on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I'd like to welcome the officials from the Ministry of Education, from UE School of Business and Applied Studies Limited, Roytech, and the University of Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Dr. Nian Gatzidoli, the chairman of this committee, and I'd like to, at this time, ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Good morning to all. Welcome. Esmond Ford, member of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Suvers. I'm a member of this committee as well, too.
Thank you, and I'd now like to ask the officials to introduce themselves, starting with the Ministry of Education, followed by the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and followed by Roytech.
Good morning. Harilal Sitran, Chief Education Officer.
Good morning. I'm Ingrid Kemchan, Curriculum Coordinator with the Curriculum Planning and Development Division.
Good morning. I am Judy Rock, representing the University of Trinidad and Tobago Center for Education Studies.
I think we have some more officials.
Yes, good morning. I'm Dennis Conrad, Manager Student Support Services, representing the Ministry of Education.
Good morning, I'm Peter Smith, Acting Director of the Division of Educational Research and Evaluation.
Good morning, Mary Bastian, Coordinator Guidance and Counseling, Ministry of Education.
Good morning, Irma Bailey Reyes, Interim Supervisor, Developmental Assessment and Intervention Unit, SSSD, Ministry of Education.
Pleasant good morning. Natalie Robinson-Arnold, School Social Work Specialist.
Good morning, Lisa Henry David, Director of Educational Planning.
Good morning, Dr. Ronald Brunton, Director of Academic Services at the UE School of Business and Applied Studies, Roytech.
Thank you so much for all being here this particular morning. I think it deserves an extra thank you for being here, because we all know what we faced on the roads this morning. So we are very grateful for your presence with us. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights lists education as one of the most basic of human rights. It is the mandate of states to provide education without discrimination to all citizens, regardless of their circumstances. Article 26(1) stipulates that everyone has the right to education, and furthermore, that education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality. There is no internationally agreed upon criteria as to the specific knowledge and skills to be acquired. Accordingly, the mere attendance of boys at educational institutions does not amount to an education. This issue today speaks to the ways in which inequality inhibits boys' academic performance, including their access, involvement, choices, and participation in education. In fulfilling the mandate of attaining parity in the development of all citizens, concerns have been raised with regards to the academic performance of boys in Trinidad and Tobago's education sector. On a national landscape, it can be argued that boys' academic underperformance in public primary and secondary education continues to be cited as an area in need of improvement. Bearing this in mind today, our inquiry objectives are: 1, to determine the level of academic performance of males as compared to females at the public primary and secondary level. 2, to examine the impact of current curriculum delivery and other factors on boys' academic performance. And 3, to determine the level of conformity of national teaching methods with regional and international best practices. We'd like to acknowledge and thank the entities for the following written submissions received from the Ministry of Education, the Office of the Prime Minister, the Equal Opportunity Commission, the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, School of Education, University of the West Indies, UE School of Business and Applied Studies Limited, Roytech, University of Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, Adult Literacy Tutors Association, ALTA, and the Catholic Religious Education Development Institute, CREDI. During the public hearing, I would like to indicate that viewers and listeners can send the committee questions related to today's topic via email at parl101@ttparliament.org, parl101@ttparliament.org, Facebook at ttparliament, and Twitter at ttparliament. At this time, I'd like to invite brief opening remarks from our officials with us. We will start with the Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ministry of Education is pleased to participate in this inquiry into boys' academic performance in public primary and secondary schools. The Ministry is committed to providing quality education for all boys and girls at all levels of the education system in an environment that healthy, safe, protective, and gender sensitive. The issue of boys' academic performance has been a concern for us in the ministry for some time. And as the literature would indicate, the issue of boys' academic performance is not a Trinidad and Tobago issue, but it's a regional issue. It's also an issue for the Americas and many of the European and UNESCO countries. In addressing this issue, there is a need for us to look beyond the gender gap and the notion that all boys are underachieving to which boys and which girls are underperforming. The challenge that we face is that much of what lies behind boys' underachievement come from factors that are outside the school environment, namely social constructions of masculine identity and behavioral expectations that are not aligned with the structure and content of the school system. Notwithstanding this, we in the Ministry of Education believe that there are things that can be done within the school system to improve this. We have shared some of these in our submissions. However, the issue of closing the gender gap within the ministry and from the data we've submitted continues to pose a challenge. And therefore, we look forward to the deliberations this morning and the recommendations emanating from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we have the University of Trinidad and Tobago?
Thank you again for being invited to this forum to discuss the challenges facing the males in our school system. We have observed over our years within the education system in preparing the teachers for the primary schools that there has been a decline in the numbers attending or wanting to teach as a first preference. We have a concern that this ratio, the male to female ratio of teachers, should be as equal as we can make it, but we've also had research over the years which suggests that there are deep personal and contextual reasons why even after we train the males, they may leave the teaching. And we would like to see that this forum be used to address some of those issues which would cause the males to leave after we've worked to engage them in the education system. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Can we now have the official from Roytech?
Good morning, everyone. I'm the representative from UWI Roytech, Dr. Ronald Brunton. As you would know, UWI Roytech is a wholly private tertiary institution. We offer programs in business, IT, as well as teacher education. Our teacher education program is offered to students throughout Trinidad and Tobago, initially through a collaboration with the University of New Brunswick. This program has now been converted to a wholly local program, and so we train teachers for the primary school level as well as teachers at the early childhood care level as well. We are pleased to be part of this hearing so that we, as an institution preparing teachers for the education system, can emphasize the importance of gender parity as we prepare teachers to enter into the teaching service. We have also noticed and observed a relatively low proportion of males entering into the teacher education programs. That number has fluctuated over the years and seems to have been in a bit of a decline as well. So we are very pleased to be part of this hearing so that we can also, as a private institution, make a contribution to evening out that disparity and ensure that those male teachers that do enter into the system are able to sustain a career as teachers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we do want to welcome the representative from the University of the West Indies, Professor Delisle. And we want to thank you, as I thanked everyone else, for making it today, because today showed our determination to be here, as nothing else would, and our resilience as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And we want to invite you to make a brief opening statement.
Well, again, thanks so much for the invitation to the University of the West Indies. Of course, we've traditionally played a very important role in educating teachers and in educating the population. The issue of gendered achievement is an issue that needs to be tackled at the level of policy, and it needs to involve everybody at different levels of government and participation, the Ministry of Education, the service providers, and certainly Parliament must play an important role. So in these deliberations, hopefully we can come to grips with the very complex issue that is something that we need to address soonest.
Thank you so much. Before we start the questioning, I'd like to indicate that we did invite the National Parent Teachers Association as well as Tutor to join us. However, due to maybe internal issues, they are unable to be here, because we did want that perspective as well to infuse our discussion. However, we will proceed as we have the officials in front of us today. So let me just remind everyone that the questioning, you direct your questioning through the chair, and so we proceed this way. So I'm going to start off today. Now, I want to thank the Ministry of Education for providing some very useful statistics, and I just want to do a very brief summary of what was provided to the committee based on our topic today. So based on the statistics that we would have received, these are the conclusions that we can draw. We have more boys dropping out of school, both at the primary and secondary level. The dropout rate at the secondary level is much higher than at the primary level, and so that disparity between male and female dropouts widens greatly at the secondary level. Boys score consistently lower in national tests, in maths and English language from standards 1 and 3. Boys score consistently lower in SEA in every region. Boys repeat forms more throughout forms 1 to 5. The marked increase in the repetition at form 5. More boys enter the primary school system. but less take CSEC at the end of Form 5. The passing grades for girls is consistently higher than the passing rate for boys. Boys' performance is at least 10% lower in comparison to girls in 32 of the 40 subjects offered at CSEC. And generally, at least 10% less boys receive full certificates than girls in any given year. So, if we take that on board, I think we can safely say that the data reflects exactly what is anecdotally said all over the country, that the boys are underperforming or performing less than the girls are. And this is data that stretches from 2013, I think, straight up to 2019. So this is consistent over that period. And I would imagine if we were to go further, we would see something that may be similar. I don't know when it would have changed, if it changed. So given the fact that we are seeing this represented in the data, given the fact that we look at what happens in our prison system, where we see males overrepresented in terms of numbers, with all of that in the pot, I want to direct my question first to the Ministry of Education. What level of concern has been raised at the Ministry of Education in terms of acknowledging that we have a problem with boys? I did hear in your opening submission, you referred to the fact that it's which boys and which girls are underperforming. But on the basis of this data, we seem to have a serious gender problem happening. What has that sparked? What response has that sparked from the level of the Ministry of Education?
Thank you, Chair. As I indicated, the issue of the gender disparity has been flagged for quite some time now in the Ministry of Education. And that would have led us to do further analysis of the data in terms of which of the students are underperforming. Our analysis would have revealed that among the group of underperforming students, there's a higher proportion of boys compared to girls. So the first thing we need to acknowledge is that within that underperforming group, there is also a group of girls that are underperforming. And therefore, in terms of coming up with a strategy, we had to look at that underperforming group collectively in terms of going forward. I can tell you, for example, in 2013, when we reviewed the primary school curriculum, if you look at the national test data, for example, that disparity, that 10%, for example, in language arts, would have been observed from as early as Standard 1. One of the areas attributed to that is the issue of language development. And when we redesigned the curriculum in 2013, we factored in best practice based on our international experience with the Pearl study, and also incorporated strategies specifically to deal with reading. There are a number of areas that we also looked at in terms of teacher professional development. So we would have factored that into teacher professional development and in consideration of what would have led to the gender difference. We would have factored that into teaching and learning strategies. In fact, in a 2009 study commissioned by the ministry, looking at the issue of the gender disparity, recommendations were made in relation to the kinds of strategies that would enhance or improve the performance of boys. Now, let me say this, that in looking at strategies that are engaging to boys, the study outlined that strategies that benefit boys also benefit girls. So it wasn't a separate tier in terms of having strategies specific to boys as opposed to girls, but strategies that will help boys, but at the same time also treat with the issue of girls. We've looked at, over the period, a number of differentiated instruction. So we've looked at teaching and learning. A number of these strategies that we've implemented, we've seen improvement in the performance of both boys and girls, but we haven't seen the kind of closure in terms of the gender gap between boys and girls. So while we are seeing improvements in performance, we are not seeing the closure of the gender gap, and therefore it continues to be a problematic area for us in education.
So if I'm taking your information that it has been acknowledged, the problem has been acknowledged. It's occurring as early as standard 1 in the test that you can pick up. So therefore, it's safe to say then that very early on, the structure of the curriculum delivery may be more advantageous to girls. Or it may be that the boys are not responding as well as the girls are. Because standard 1, they would only have passed through the infant classes. So, and I'm hearing as well that in considering strategies and so on, boy-centered pedagogy, if you look at it like that, it tends to improve the performance of the girls as well. And we have not seen that gap close in terms of boys performing better. So my question is, if we have not seen that, what is the level of response that we are looking at? Do you consider this a major problem from the Ministry of Education aspect?
It is a significant problem for us. We've seen improvement in performance for both boys and girls, but in terms of the closing of the gender gap, let me just say that, for example, that 10% difference in performance of boys versus girls that you mentioned, we've seen similar results, for example, in the UK where studies are done. So it is a problematic area that we are looking at in the ministry in terms of how best we can not just improve performance, but close the gender disparity. Let me just say one thing, and it's something that we have tried to address utilizing a whole school approach. In terms of, you have the curriculum, which was designed in terms of addressing some of these areas that we've identified. I think part of the challenge that we have faced is in terms of the enactment of the curriculum at the level of the school. We have identified some challenges in the way schools are organized and managed, and therefore it includes curriculum delivery. And one of the things that we have done is we've developed a local school-based management model which is multifaceted and includes a number of areas, including teaching and learning. So I think part of what we are currently focusing on is looking at how we improve that quality of curriculum delivery in the school, so that while we have completed 5 years now of the curriculum and it's now due for review, which we will take another look at in terms of the gender issues, I think part of our challenge is in the enactment of the curriculum and ensuring that gender awareness, for example, and appropriate strategies that need to be implemented that engages boys in the classroom is what we need to look at.
So I'll ask this question to all of the officials with us. Should boys be taught differently from girls?
I will take first stab at that. The notion of different learning styles for students, I mean, is pervasive, and I think we all are on the same page with that. There is, however, a view that males as a whole group utilize a particular learning style, and therefore teaching and learning methodologies must be specific in that sense to boys. The literature currently is suggesting that what we need to do, for example, in utilizing differentiated learning is cater for all students and their specific needs, so that we need to know the students who we have in front of us and cater for that, as opposed to pulling aside strategies that are specific for boys and as opposed to girls. Again, based on the research we've done, there is the suggestion that strategies that benefit boys will also benefit girls, but we need to factor them into the equation in terms of planning.
Anybody else wants to weigh in on this? Should boys be taught differently from girls?
Madam Chair, I remember an experimentation, if I want to characterize it as that, where we had several of the schools changed to single-gender schools in the secondary sector, and that was suddenly brought to an end. I never got the reasons why officially, but I realized that it did not work to separate the genders, and in the public school, that is, without other supporting structures in place. So while it might be easy to say we could take them apart and teach them differently, at the end of the day, they have to learn the socialization skills to work together. And I believe that part of the problem comes from not dealing with the whole child. Besides the education aspect, coming to school and learning your ABCs, there's also this need to connect with the family. And in the boys who are not performing, because there are boys who are performing and performing well, they're excelling. You have on the other end those boys who are not performing, and I believe that it's a whole child approach that should be adopted. For example, we know that people are living in very scary situations. There are children who are not sleeping at night. They are terrified of the gunshots and so on. And it seems that nothing further is being done to allay their fears. The boys have a concern for their mothers being safe, for their mothers working too hard. And if these are not addressed, they are at school, but their minds are back at home. What is happening with the rest of the family? So that we appreciate that the boys need some care and attention, rather than how our society has traditionally treated them as they must man up and keep their emotions to themselves. We have a deep culture that suggests that it is one way to be a male in our society as against a female. But our young boys are being faced with some situations that even adults are having difficulty with traversing. And therefore I believe the whole child approach within a whole school approach is necessary. Not necessarily segregating them, but integrating them and making them feel a part of a community and not alone.
Thanks. I wasn't necessarily suggesting segregation. I didn't reach there yet. I was just dealing with the actual way in which the curriculum is delivered to them, but I take your point. I think I take your point. Yui?
Before I answer the question on pedagogy, I think that we need to be very systematic in defining what the problem is. The ministry correctly said which boys and which girls, and so we've made some advances as far as that is concerned. We know it's probably rural boys. We know it's low achieving boys. We also are aware that in the secondary school, the gap is very much larger than in the primary school. And we also can understand, compared with other countries in Latin America, for example, that girls do slightly better in maths and science in Trinidad and Tobago compared with other Latin American countries in which boys tend to do better in math, and the gap in reading using the PISA data 2015 is significantly larger, at least a year and a half difference on average. So that tells you that the magnitude, I heard figures of 10%, etc., but the magnitude of the problem when you benchmark is significant. And so what is required is a systematic response. That includes looking at pedagogy, because our pedagogy, the way we teach, very traditional. From the Jamaican studies, it's clear that the way we teach in the Caribbean might not benefit boys. And we know that for sure because in the 2002 Australian Commission, they talk about boy-friendly pedagogies, which was translated into what we call productive pedagogies. And the way we teach in Trinidad and Tobago is quite different to fostering deep thinking and encouraging engagement. That can come from us as service providers, but there needs to be an overall thrust on the part of the ministry. Finally, in comparing ourselves with Jamaica, because I was involved in an IDB study in 8 Caribbean countries, in Jamaica, there are more interventions compared with Trinidad and Tobago. You don't see interventions in Trinidad and Tobago, so I can identify somebody in the ministry in Jamaica who is doing an intervention with boys and she is responsible. Are the interventions effective? Probably not. But at least they are trying to focus, and they will get better and more systematic. But we would not solve our problems by not being systematic and using general strategies.
Roytek, do you want to weigh in on this?
I just wanted to say that the curriculum delivery is certainly an issue that has been identified. And we do not expect that change in the delivery of the curriculum is likely to change overnight. However, the curriculum at our institution really focuses on inclusive education, and I know the ministry has indicated differential learning. So we believe that we have to really train our teachers to look at students as individuals, and that while we're not focusing on pulling the boys aside, we are training our teachers to teach to individual students and to build on their strengths. And that is the differentiated learning approach that we're taking at our institution. It is based on initially the Canadian model that was infused through the University of New Brunswick. This approach is also influencing our local program. So we have developed a local program based on that curriculum, and we are open to modifying and localizing that curriculum to meet our students where they are in the classroom. And I think that is really what UWI Roytek has been really encouraging in our development of teachers, that they're not teaching the curriculum by itself, but they're teaching individual learners in the classroom so as to consider the context, where students are coming from, what are their individual challenges, and how does the teacher play a role in bridging that gap.
My last question before I ask the committee members to weigh in, and it comes from something I think Dr. Rock would have mentioned. There was this pilot, I remember this pilot happening in terms of segregating some of the public schools by gender. And I don't know why it was not continued. So maybe the Ministry of Education can give us some clue into that, I'm not sure. But the point I want to focus on is, if we look at just results and terminal examinations, I think we can be on fairly safe ground to say that our most successful schools are our same-sex schools. So it kind of makes me wonder, I don't know why the pilot was stopped, but in terms, can we, as a blanket statement, say then, because someone looking at it may just say, same-sex education seems to be working better, boys are doing better if they're in same-sex schools, why don't all our schools be same-sex schools? Somebody may just say that blanket statement based on the data, and I think that can be supported. Is this a correct statement? And if it is that we are seeing our best successes from same-sex schools, is it not trending in that direction that I know for some of those schools, PE is a compulsory subject at CSEC. I think it's at CIC or one of those schools. So can we say that then, that is an experiment that maybe should have been continued and should work for us in Trinidad and Tobago?
Chair, I think we need to be careful in taking what I would consider a simplistic view to a complex problem. If you look at an input process model for schooling, and you do a comparison with the current single-sex schools and mixed schools, you will realize that inputs are different, process resources are different, and therefore you will get. And therefore, using that, if you have schools that are getting your top 5% of the students coming in, then what is required at the process level is not the same. There are significant differences in context of the nominational schools versus some of the mixed schools, and therefore we have started moving in the ministry towards utilizing what we call a value-added model, taking into consideration where students start from and the results that they get. And utilizing that approach, you may realize that notwithstanding some of these schools getting the best results in terms of value added, they are not adding as much value as many of the other mixed schools. So I think the way to treat with that is to really look at a value added model and not a simplistic model. I will make a few comments in terms of the change with respect to some of our schools. I think let me first say that we did a post-test after 1 year with respect to those schools, and what we found is that rather than adding value, the student scores went down. But also associated with that were a number of other social issues, indiscipline, male and female relationships. Maybe that enough time wasn't given for it to see benefits of it, but there were challenges in terms of that, and at the policy level a decision was made to discontinue. But being around at that time, when we looked at the literature with respect to single-sex schools and mixed schools, there were differing views expressed, and in fact, I looked at a meta-analysis of research done, and what was found as in many cases was simply a change from mixed to single-sex without the necessary input and changes that might have been required to do it. So that I am not sure at this point making the assertion that we should go with single-sex school is one that we want to follow.
Anybody else wants to weigh in on this? Yui? Yes.
Well, we are fortunate to have the situation in which there are some mixed schools that do very well. What many countries do now is that they take best practice at one site and they try to disseminate it. So there are schools like St. George's College and what used to be Coover East, I don't know what the new name is now, which are mixed schools. But they do extremely well. And so why are they doing well? Certainly comparative to some of these single-sex boys and girls schools. and we go and we expand that model, that's an opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, anybody else wants to weigh in on this? If not, I'm open the floor for, oh, sorry, Ms. Kemchan.
Ms. Kemchan, thank you. I just want to say that from the perspective of an educator, the notion of which schools perform to what degree well, either academically or in other areas, is a massively complex one. And we can't underestimate the issue of school culture, the issue of the ages of schools, that issue of denominational versus government. It's a very, very complex issue. When you dissect it, you can come up with any number of variables that can influence. I think the most significant one that bears itself out, and including the two schools to which Dr. Delay referred, is the input, the level of student performance at entry, which will noticeably have an impact at the end point.
Great.
Yeah.
Mr. Ford?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Added to also what the professor mentioned and also Ms. Kemchan, again, Puna Government Secondary can also be added to that list. Right? It's a co-ed school and they have been doing pretty well within the last couple of years. But to the Chief Education Officer, in your opening statement, you mentioned that, well, the concern the ministry had. But could you put a year to exactly when you didn't put a year to the statement when the situation was identified? Is it possible you can put a year to it?
The discussions surrounding gender differential, I think it was 2009 that study was commissioned. I think we started that discussion around 2009, and that would have evolved from comparison of boys versus girls to which students. So it's an evolving process that we are looking at. I think the context and understanding, as Dr. Delisle pointed out, the nature of the issue that we are treating with, even looking at it within the Trinidad and Tobago context, there are some rural schools that there are challenges in, so that national level intervention may be problematic unless we understand fully what all the issues are and how we treat with it. But it would have started, I think, around 2009.
Therefore, in your submission, right, the table with regards to dropouts, right, where it's identified that from in the primary school level, 2013-2014, there was a total of 151 dropouts at the primary school level. Right, there is no data at the secondary school level, but 151 from 2013 to 2014 has been the highest figure as we come forward. Right, the lowest being in 2016-2017, where we had 31 dropouts, and then we went up to 2018-2019, where we had 108 dropouts at the primary school level. If we go across to the secondary school level in terms of the dropouts, 2014 to 2015, we had 1,081. And 2018 to 2019, we probably just at around 700 to your statistics. Now, Dr. Rock mentioned with regards to the pilot project for single-sex schools, 2010 to 2013 it started. And the chairman also identified it also. What is the present status of this particular project?
The sex
project?
project.
The single-sex school project, which was in the 2010 to 2013 period.
That has been discontinued.
Discontinued.
Yeah.
Any particular reason why it was discontinued?
As I indicated, I think there was a policy decision taken to discontinue based on some preliminary analysis that was done in terms of after 1 year, we didn't see, based on a pre-post test that was done, we didn't see any improvement. In fact, we saw regression in some cases, and there were a number of attendant social issues surrounding same-sex students being in particular schools.
Okay, but again, looking at, again, the history, as the professor would have mentioned, you know, we have some single-sex schools that are excelling, Likewise, we can talk about the co-ed schools that are also excellent. And, you know, to say that it has been discontinued, the actual final document, is it possible that the committee could be provided with a copy of it? Right, because there would have been some conclusions and decisions as to why it was discontinued and so on.
Yes, we can provide you with a copy of that. Dr. I was involved, I think.
Okay. Thirdly, right, bear with me, Mr. Chairman. Thirdly, the junior secondary school system, that's the term, that's the actual term of it. Like when we had Creb Junior Sec, Mount Hope Junior Sec, that's the correct term? Junior secondary school system, all right? Shift system, right? I know we have done away with the shift system and we have made them basically a whole day schools, and we have changed some of the names where they are now secondary schools, right? But the names have been changed in terms of the academic and skills and vocational subjects that were taught. Are they still heavily maintained in those schools?
One of the policies of the Ministry of Education of the last decade has been the actual expansion of the entire technical vocational area, including Caribbean vocational qualifications being offered. Those schools that would traditionally have been junior secs and senior comps, now renamed and now whole school, because they would have had infrastructure and equipment in place for continuation and maintenance of those programs, tend to still have heavy subscription to those programs. There has also been a policy on the part of the ministry to encourage all secondary schools to offer to all students at least one study option in the Caribbean vocational qualifications group. We have 33 what are called regional occupational standards that are offered in the country at this point in time, and we did provide some data for you in terms of number of students subscribing and so on in those areas.
But is there any correlation that in terms of the numbers, in terms of dropouts, in relation to the change that you all would have made, do we have any statistics to show that if there was a difference in terms of dropouts of individuals, seeing that, you know, now that the emphasis in terms of the plumbing, the agricultural science, the woodwork, carpentry, and so on, could we correlate any differences that would have taken place as a result of the change in the system?
I am not sure that I fully understand the question, but I don't think we have analyzed or done correlation between subject offering and dropouts. What I can tell you with respect to dropout, because we've been trying a number of initiatives and because we've been looking at them to see whether they're working or not, we recognize, as I mentioned earlier, there are some issues at the level of schools in terms of how schools are organized and managed. And therefore, one of the things that we have, or we are currently doing, and we started a couple of years now, is a new trust towards school-based management. So that, for example, the issue of dropout and attendance, I think it's since 2013, we started paying particular attention to part of the trust was using data to make decisions in school. If you look closely at the dropout data for the secondary level, you will notice 2018 and 2019 there has been a reduction. I suspect part of which is related to that increasing attention being paid to student absenteeism and dropout. Still early days in that process, but we are working towards it.
And would you say, last question, and would you say is there any correlation between, because there's some statistics you gave us there where at Form 3, right, we have a dropout, high percentage dropout rate. Any correlation there in terms of why at Standard 3? Any statistics, any research done there?
Sure that I can answer why, but I think if you look at the data, I think generally Form 3 and at Form 5 you tend to have the highest level of dropout. There are suggestions in terms of maybe students leaving at Form 3 based on employment opportunities or in some of the rural areas where moving into family trees, etc., might be influenced, but we haven't looked at the reasons per se.
Senator Sobers?
Having looked at some of the documents that were provided, I recognize that there are efforts that are being adopted or made to treat with engagement of students within the school, as well as after-school activities as well, liaising with parents subsequent to students leaving the school compound and engaging them in at the domestic and community level training and engaging parents in sessions to promote positive student-parent relationships. And there are whole other activities within the school and outside of the school. Can you indicate to the committee what successes have you all had from such activities, as well as specify, any of these programs, especially with respect to parental engagement? Because I think, having gone to a boys' school myself, I know in terms of being in school is one thing, treating with other students, teachers, having different clubs and societies and whatnot. But a lot of after-school activities tend to damage the tremendous amount of work that teachers do when students are actually at school. And that in itself could cause students to sway off the correct path. And a constant engagement sometimes after school assists a lot. So I was very happy seeing it here, but can you indicate a little bit more on what has been done?
The issue of parental engagement is one that continues to provide a challenge for us. But our student support services are responsible for conducting a number of parental engagement, parenting program in schools, and I will ask Ms. Robinson to provide us some feedback in terms of her experience with this initiative.
Parental involvement has been taking place in student support services since 2014. What has happened, some of our successes is that we have increased parental involvement in schools. Parents understand a lot of what is happening with their children in terms of the developmental stage, some experiences in their child's education, and as a result of the heavy parenting workshop that we engage in, students perform better in school. There's an increase in improvement in behavior with respect to our children in the school system.
Can you indicate any specific programs, though, that you all may have developed over time, or sessions that you all would have developed over time to treat with parents engaging students or engaging teachers more at schools and after-school activities as well?
Sure. So we have a lot of specialized programs. We have programs like fathers programs to foster better male relationships with their sons. We have programs for parents and students who have experienced trauma, so that they can equip to that child abuse programs as well. Those are some of the specialized programs that we engage in to foster better relationship with home, school, and community with our parents and students.
There has been a lot of discussion on curriculum delivery, but I haven't heard anyone speak on actually possibly changing the curriculum a bit. I know the chair and I would have discussed a bit, and I think Deputy Speaker Esmondford as well spoke about it a bit, but remember, but I think, because we ran a career day recently at a particular institution, and there was so much interest by the students from various schools, boys and girls, in new and emerging careers as opposed to the normal run-of-the-mill careers. Unfortunately, there was a lack of interest, as a matter of fact, in doctors and lawyers, which was very surprising to us, but a tremendous amount of interest in robotics and gaming industry and entertainment and whatnot. And I was wondering whether or not, apart from curriculum delivery, what about adding these things possibly now to the curriculum as well?
So I'm very glad that you brought some of those up. I think when persons think of the curriculum, without getting into the detail of what actually obtains at present, people have a very staid model of what may have obtained when they were at school. The past decade has seen us do 2 revisions of the curriculum, first at the primary level and secondly at the secondary level. I would like to say that within the curriculum, the subjects themselves lend themselves to all of the approaches that you're talking about within there. So I'd like to highlight one at the lower secondary level, which is called technology education, which explores the range of possibilities of technology and its use within it. We actually at this point in time have an active stream project which brings projects of robotics, of Legos, of app development, of all of these areas directly to our students. And you may or may not have seen in the media over the past years where schools like Shogona South, which is a traditional school that you would not expect would have had high performance, winning out at the national level in something like app development. This is across the board that we have this kind of engagement. Currently too, at the ordinary level, we have digital media, graphic design and so on, using varying methodologies and technologies being presented as viable options for study. These are subjects at the CSEC level now, which can be pursued by students. I do want to say too that across the entire range of CVQs, Caribbean vocational qualifications, it's one of the places where there's a lot of activity, technology involvement as well, and the boys are highly engaged in those. So expansion of those has been one of the priorities of the ministry, to bring areas that actually engage and students' interests are activated to as many students as possible within those areas. Additionally, we have subjects such as physical education, which has expanded to be an A-level and advanced level option now. So a few years ago, I think it was 2004, physical education became an examinable subject at the ordinary level. 2 years ago, it moved up to the advanced level. So there has been expansion of the curriculum to include the very areas that you're talking about, which will provoke students' interest and take them into very different areas, very different career choices.
And excuse me, I'd like to draw to the committee's attention the guidance program or guidance officers. They also focus a lot on career guidance and career pathways. So perhaps, Ms. Bastian, you would add a couple of words on that?
Yes, also to add, at the level of guidance and counseling in the schools, presently most of our secondary schools have a resident guidance officer, and we also have guidance personnel at the primary level. And starting from as early as Infant 1, straight up to Standard 5, and then continuing at the secondary level until Upper 6, we have a comprehensive career guidance program that we run. And so I'm happy to hear that students are beginning to move away from the usual options, because we spend a lot of time helping students explore contemporary options and also look at how they can match their interests and their competencies with aspects of their personality with these new and upcoming careers. So that comprehensive implementation of that career development program, many times we culminate in career days as well. That will also contribute to motivating our boys towards remaining in school and seeing options beyond just the normal options that may have developed over the years.
Senator Thompson, aye.
I remember. I'd like to thank Member Ford for asking the question of the Ministry of Education as to when the ministry began to pay attention to this question. It's such an important question about what's happening with the boys and dropping out of school, because we read the newspapers every day and you see where they are and what they're doing. But 2009, and I am wondering what was happening all these years. Slumberland? Nobody who has been involved in education to any extent will not have heard of the name Dr. Vina Jules. You all know Dr. Vina Jules? Yes. Very good friend of mine. She wrote her PhD dissertation on students' experiences of secondary schooling in Trinidad and Tobago the first 3 years. And I remember when that was revealed, there were so many newspaper reports about what was happening to children who were dropping out of secondary school in the first 3 years. It was a big discussion that was going on in all of the media. And I would have imagined that if this is a concern that was inquired into, that the ministry would have set up and paid attention. She looked at race and gender as factors of student survival to the fifth form in Trinidad and Tobago in Selwyn Ryan's book, which he edited, Social and Occupational Stratification in Contemporary Trinidad and Tobago. All of these. Survivors of the experience the first 3 years of secondary schooling in Trinidad and Tobago, and this is published in the book Children's Rights, Caribbean Realities, edited by Christine Barrow. I was glad to get a free copy of it because I have a chapter in it as well. And when Dr. Jules did her study, she examined things like socioeconomic status and class and race and religion and family patterns, which she thought, and you know, it's not just parental engagement, but to see what was happening with children in this society. And I would have expected that all of these things would have informed our way of dealing with the problem. So changing the curriculum is not going to cut it if children are experiencing all these problems. Socioeconomic status was very important in terms of who are the people dropping out of school. When she examined it by race, the Chinese were the people staying in school, and they were not going Chinatown, they were staying in school. So you find that there are so many things that impact on this question. And I really can't understand why over all these years, we're talking about over 20 years, and we are discussing this question. There's so much that we could have done. But as I say, I'm a merchant of hope, so I hope that things will happen. We've had, when you look at what is coming out of UWI and what they've submitted to us, there have been so many studies. And I wondered if UWI was in fact telling us, look at all these people who have written, why don't you go and read these papers, and then maybe you can answer the question that you're asking us, because enough people have written about this and what is happening. I want to ask a question. Is there a position in the Ministry of Education? I've asked it before and I'm not clear, maybe I'm not understanding the response. Is there a position called Truancy Officer in Trinidad and Tobago? If so, where are they? If so, how many are there? Because to me, when we're talking about school dropout and so, we're talking about truancy. So we need to see what is happening in terms of these officers. Do they exist or not? Boys become men. Men, even before they become men, become fathers in the society.
So this is such a crucial question about what is happening with our boys that we have to really pay attention. And it's happening from the primary level, not at the secondary level. And these boys are not disappearing into the woodworks. They drop out of school for a number of reasons, and they join gangs. And we're reading about them. Some of them have children, and these children are without fathers. So this is a question that we really have to deal with as a matter of urgency. I hope next 20 years we're not going to be studying, looking at the academic performance, because it is the success in the schools that are going to propel you into a proper job, and you're going to be able to provide for your families. So can we expect that the Ministry of Education and the other people who are dealing in education going to really up their game and deal with these problems that we are inquiring into today? It's multifaceted. We see that it's multifaceted, but can you comfort me and tell me that, yes, we're really serious and we're going to be working on these things? I've read a lot of papers here, and I've made a lot of inquiries. Well, people know me might not like to make inquiries, and I'm finding out a lot of it is theory, you know, that these things aren't really always happening. We know, and we say, yes, we're doing this, but when you try to inquire and find it, and you call people who are doing the diploma in education, and we call, you know, other people, we find that sometimes we can't find some of these nice words that we read in these voluminous papers here. We don't always find it. Nobody mentioned that there is something going on with the international school, that they also have a program where people who are doing their masters in education, you know, they are actually being sensitized as to how to attack the problems of the boys' learning styles and how we deal with the boys who are actually coming into our schools and who are not, you know, finding that our schools are student-friendly at times. So a number of these things are happening, and the academic performance has been impacted by the bullying and so on. So we can't say boys will be boys, because in the most prestigious colleges in Trinidad and Tobago, boys are being bullied. And many times, a blind eye is being turned. And the parents, I've spoken to some of them, they are quite concerned. What is happening? Whoever wants to take it, just answer and tell me what is really happening in terms of all of the problems that are impacting these boys, that we want them to remain in school because education is important and they are the fathers of tomorrow.
And before you answer, I just want you to answer with the focus on the truancy question as well. I really would like to get an answer to that in the discussion as you go forward.
Okay, thank you. I think you've done an excellent job in terms of highlighting the complexity of the issue that we're dealing with. Let me deal with the truancy issue first. In terms of the position of truancy officer, we don't have any truancy officers on the establishment. Truancy is dealt with at the level of social work, so that students who are truant are often referred to the social workers in the ministry.
Could I just, I just want to clarify, the position does not exist.
There is in the Education Act a reference to truancy officers. Those positions were never created. Okay. So the position does not exist. It's not that it exists and there are no people. Nobody's in the job. It just doesn't exist. All right. Okay. So I think that clears up that. So truancy is dealt with at a social work level. Yeah. I think one of my colleagues spoke about a whole school approach to dealing with issues. several things. One is, in terms of dealing with issue, we recognize at the level of the ministry that there is a need for greater school-home community engagement. That is one of the areas that we are paying particular attention to. When I started, I said that there are factors within the school that we can treat with, and there are those that come from outside the school environment, and we need to engage. Let me assure the honorable member that the ministry is very concerned about male underachievement. A lot of what we are doing is in the context of trying to make our schools effective. And in order to do that, there are a number of fundamentals that need to take place. So for example, this issue of male underachievement and dropout, where the numbers are predominantly male. Within the school environment, the teacher-student interaction and the kind of interaction that we have, if persons are not sensitive to it, can actually exacerbate some of those differences that contribute to students wanting to leave school or going and look for a job, etc. And therefore, I'll tell you, one of the things we've started doing as part of, we started an induction program in the Ministry of Education. In the past, teachers would join and teach for a while, and then they go to teacher training. The induction program is not a one-off, it's over a period of 2 years. And one of the things that is highlighted within that program is the issue of understanding gender, the impact of gender as a social construct, impact of gender as a patriarchal system, social institution from a judge. So in other words, one of the things as we work towards improving pedagogy is strengthening teachers' understanding of those interactions between teacher and student in the school, some of those which reinforce some of the negative things that we have. So that's one of the areas. But I think when you look at student underperformance or student underachievement, and you look at it in the context of effective schools, there are a number of areas that schools that are doing well pay attention to. Teaching pedagogy is one area. Teacher training is another area. The kind of assessment we use, another area. More and more, and I think somebody mentioned the issue of school climate and culture. We have actually developed within the ministry and piloted a school climate survey to pick up some of those issues that actually impact on how students respond. We are paying particular attention to leadership and governance. I think one of the big issues we have in our schools has to do with leadership, how schools are organized and managed. And some of the issues you raise with respect to schools really emanates from that area. So there are a number of things that the ministry is looking at in terms of impacting on student performance and specifically male underachievement, but within that bigger whole school framework.
I want to, if I may, Madam Chair, you mentioned engagement, with parents and so on, and time again, we hear about parents not coming to PTA meetings, parents not coming in, and teachers are frustrated. But I have a problem, because when I used to be a teacher many moons ago, at the primary school level, I've taught from 5-year-old to 65-year-olds, there used to be a PTA meeting after school. Now I understand that the PTA meeting takes place during school hours, and parents have to take time off from work because teachers are not staying after hours for a PTA meeting. So you are accommodating the teachers. If you have a PTA meeting once per term, sir, is it too much to ask that the teachers can stay back so that the parents can come after work, or at least just take 1 hour from work to come to that meeting? I mean, maybe I got it wrong, maybe my information is wrong and they're actually having the meetings after school, but I find it is not much of a sacrifice to make as a teacher to stay back, to engage with your, you know, the parents of your children, if it is just once per term. And I want to say that in the US, teachers aren't paid during the vacation time when they aren't taught. I just throw that in.
I want to see if the chief education officer, because I think he might be afraid to answer that question. Whichever way he answers, I'm sure he will have some difficulties. So I want to suggest that that question go to him after as a sidebar. But the point is taken. I want to...
I'm sure he's glad for protection.
I'm certain he's glad for it. I want to just, you know, we're going to wrap up with the last few questions, but I want to just put it squarely on the table that this committee is a human rights committee. And this issue that we are speaking about in terms of boys' education and their underperformance, squarely what we are looking at is, are we doing our boys a disservice? Are we violating their right to education by not ensuring that we do what is necessary to really engage and have them educated? That is the crux of the matter. And we're looking at that in the context of, as Senator Ahi said, we know where these boys who are dropping out, who are underperforming, we know where they end up. We know where they are overrepresented. So I don't know intimately if there are studies that have been done, and I suspect there would be, in terms of that correlation between the dropouts, the population of remand yard and the male prison, and the underachievement. I would suspect, I do not have the data to back that up, that if we look at the prison population, the percentage of men at that point, who were boys at one point, who have dropped out of school or who have underachieved at the school level would be high. So therefore, we are looking at this in the sense that if we are not doing what it takes to keep our boys in school and educate them, we are exposing them, in a sense, to that life where they drop out or they underachieve and then they find their way into nefarious activities. And that is the crux of the matter. And so me personally, I know we are looking at it, and for over 20 years we have been looking at it. And based on the data, I don't see that we are addressing the issue, because the issue may be that we have underachieving boys and girls, but where the boys end up, that is the question. And so therefore, are we doing them a disservice? And that is the crux of the matter. That is the question we are asking in today's hearing. I'm going to turn over to Mr. Jenny Smith.
I have been examining the records from 2015 to 2019, and I will deal first with the persons who stayed. So I want to compliment you all for what you have been doing from 2015, because there's a significant change, because in 2015 you had 59% of the proportion of students graduating, male students, and in 2019 it moved from 59 to 61%. Also with English, in 2015 you had 41% of the male students failing, and in 2019 you had only 29% of the males who stayed failing. So I must compliment you for whatever program you would have initiated, and ask you if you would have looked at it in terms of the results and what you were doing in terms of quantifying it and applying it across the board to kind of keep progressive results. But I cannot not look at the situation with respect to the dropouts, because I think that yes, I spoke about the academic achievement and we are seeing successes, right, with those who stayed. But I'm looking also at the dropouts, And I am drawing a conclusion, it may be correct or not, because what I see is that at the exam stage with respect to the primary schools, where they have to sit exams, is the time when they fell off the most. And also it correlated with the times when they had to face exams again. At Form 5, there was a fallout again. So is it that in your studies, you will ever discover that it is just basically males having a problem in facing challenges, or just the basic anticipation of examination? Is it that generally our society of males, they don't like to own up to these things? And bearing in mind that the fact that at the primary school where they have the challenge of, having ulterior or alternatives to doing exams before them, that they take the easier way out? That's my question.
Who wants to weigh in on this?
Madam Chair, there have been several suggestions for student dropout. If you look at the data, and in terms of student underperformance, you would see, for example, in certain of the educational districts, in terms of their ranking, they're more or less at the bottom consistently. I think Dr. Delisle mentioned the issue of the rural areas. I think there's a pattern where, as I indicated earlier, that many students who leave, whether it's at prior to exam in primary school or at secondary school, it may be linked to economic activity. In other words, whether it's agriculture or fishing or areas, so that many of our males actually pursue economic activities, and therefore, because of this gender socialization, they don't see the importance of completing schools. So that's something that we are looking at. One of the things that we've done in the ministry in looking at the data is also using the data for targeted intervention, so that where we see schools where there's a higher dropout rate, we make sure that they get access to, so some of the secondary schools may have 2 guidance officers or a guidance officer and a social worker. So we are trying to look at targeting intervention while looking at the system on a whole, trying to deal with it from using targeted intervention in schools. In terms of a system level, as I keep talking about school-based management, because if we get the support from schools, if schools are properly organized and managed, issue of dropout and absenteeism will be brought to our attention at a much earlier stage. We've started that attention to dropout and absenteeism, as I said, in 2017. If you look at the secondary school data in 2018 and 2019, the number of dropout would have almost reduced to 50% or a little over that. So we are seeing some indication, but more than that, coupling that with where these dropouts and absenteeism occur, apart from the monitoring, is looking, as Ms. Robinson said, home and family intervention, parenting and education programs. We have students who, because of disciplinary issues, may drop out. We've started learning enhancement centers in an attempt to rehabilitate some of these students. We have actually put in place supporting programs. We have a STARS program for example, for students who have underperformed at SCA, and those who would have remained in the primary school system, and those who would have moved on to secondary school. We are particularly focusing on in the STARS program, using differentiated instruction to cater for the individual needs. We are looking, as Ms. Kempton indicated, at expanding options for students, so that there are a number of things happening. I think one of the things and one of the points I want to make in line with what the comments that the chair just indicated, if you look at the literature across the board, one of the things that come to the fore in relation to dropout and some of the challenges we are facing is socioeconomic status. Students who come from working class parents or parents who are not employed, they are the one, that particular group that tend to drop out more than likely. And therefore, I want to suggest to the committee, and while the ministry recognizes its role in terms of addressing this issue, that there are institutions or issues outside of the schooling system that need to come to work together, whether it's social services. We have students in the school who drop out because they can't afford to. So that while we are working with Ministry of Social Development in terms of meeting some of those challenges, at the level of the school, we have many schools who, through their own fundraising activities, provide support for students in school. And that is an issue that I think goes beyond the ministry. And while we will continue to work, there's a need to look at the issue a little bit broader than simply an education issue and a bigger social issue within the larger community.
I'm asking that question because of the fact that we see the implications of crime and the early recruitment of young boys as well as the secondary school young men into gangs and gang-related issues, right? And I am concerned as to your studies because did you quantify the reasons for leaving or the reasons for the dropout to determine which is the highest issue that you could really have a targeted intervention to really help these young boys or young men into decision-making, proper decision-making based on logical explanations?
Member, the University of Trinidad and Tobago did a study back in 2014. This is Jackman and Joseph. And they interviewed over 400 young men. Oh, sorry, they were in focus groups. And the key problem was that of the need to support themselves. They had no money to come to school. They had to support the families at home. So that was the key for the dropout. Another reason that came to the fore, they felt that the teachers were not engaging them, that they were coming and nobody seemed to care, that they had some urgency about them. Then there was another group that decided that they could earn more money than getting the credentials. There is an outlook out there that you don't have to have an education to succeed. I think that is coming through in the society among several of the young men who are looking for an alternative because they don't see themselves competing with those who already are in the upper schools and so on. So they have been turning to alternatives to find an income. The society is not helping when we do not engage people like the media, for example, in encouraging educational programming, in the churches and in encouraging the youths to come back. So we need, beyond the schools, to engage these youths and to show them that there's more to life than the pursuit of finances.
Dr. Rock, you are on point. You are so correct because we see it manifesting in our society today. And I have had personal experience visiting a school in the West where I actually saw a teacher of a classroom of 30 only teaching to about 10. And that would have been about just 3 years ago. And you know, we see it being manifested today. So did the Ministry of Education take notice of those findings from what you are speaking about, and what action did they take?
We submitted them to the ministry. I'm not sure of the follow-up.
Could we just get a comment to close this section off really in terms of the studies that have been done? I think Senator Ahi alluded to it as well. what is the relationship between the Ministry of Education and, say, the Department of Education at UTT, UWI, and so on, in terms of the research that is done, the studies, the data that comes out, and how does that inform policy?
The ministry, well, now that we're under one umbrella, but even prior to the ministries, the merging of the two ministries, would have collaborated with the different tertiary level institutions on various issues related to policy. The issues raised in terms of defining, we were privy to the findings of that study, and as a result of that, one of the things, I mean, there are several dimensions, but one of the things that the ministry has been looking at is and we've also found that in terms of practice outside through the student support services, those reasons outlined, they need to support themselves, the issue of student engagement, employment opportunities. There are students who are actually attracted out of the school system because of it turns out to be basically a dollars and cents issue. So we are aware of those things, and through programs within the student support services, we are trying to counter that. But we need, at the end of the day, I'll give you a concrete example that came to me just this week. A student was reported to be out of school. The parent was contacted. All investigation pointed to this delinquency of the student. Rather than the parent working with the school, the parent became aggressive and threatening and all of that, so that the Ministry of Education and the services that we provide can go so far, but we need to get that reciprocal support from the family, from the community. And as I said, that is one of the areas we have targeted for intervention, that family, community engagement in terms of moving the system forward.
Okay, understood. Could I just get from maybe Professor Delisle, in terms of the research and how that informs policy, and what is the mechanism by which the research and the findings informs policy?
So I think that internationally we are at a point now where we know that boys' performance is we call it a wicked policy issue, and that means that it changes over time. So for example, we see in places like Norway and Finland, in which the gap between boys and girls, and they have very good systems, are increasing. I already explained that the Caribbean and possibly Trinidad and Tobago is quite unusual. So we do need more support in terms of the ministry itself having a research center, because the ministry has been at the forefront in identifying that there is a issue. Well, it's not even before 2009, 2005 with the national test. It was very clear that the differences were greater than people thought, and that data wasn't available in the past. So the ministry will always have a role that your best researchers cannot play, and the universities cannot play. At this point, working with the IDB, we are sure it's a connected problem. So a number of terms have been thrown out: truancy, dropout, engagement, but they're all connected. So a student, and let me put it very simply in terms of a story. A student, and very similar to what Hayes and Evans write in her work, her ethnographic work. A student comes to school, the teaching is very boring, it's not authentic, it's separated. So either you do science or you do plumbing, rather than connecting science with plumbing. So it's not real life learning. So the student gets disaffected, disengaged in class. The climate or the culture of the school, as the CEO said, is in high school doesn't encourage participation, so the child loses connectedness with the school. The child begins to stay home. So you don't have truancy officers. So if a child stays home and you don't have gangs, it's okay. But if there are gangs, then the child can get connected with something else in the community. So that's what is happening. It's changing because of the changing dynamics. The aspirations of the student, what are their aspirations? What do they want to become? So if they are low aspirations, then fine, I'm going to drop out and, go and, well, they can't work in the maxi again, right? Not supposed to. Some students eventually drop out, and that's why you see dropout rate being higher. So it's a connected series of steps, and we need data for that. We need ethnographic studies, and so everybody have to work together, including especially the ministry, and connect us, because we can't do it without the Ministry of Education.
So if I'm getting it, and I want to make sure I have this to just close this particular thing before I take I think Mr. Ford and so in terms of research, we are saying that there needs to be more.
Yes.
And
I know people think it's a lot, but yes, you still need more high quality research, not just basic descriptions. Sorry, Chair.
So therefore, in acknowledgement of the problem, which we have acknowledged as a problem as way back as 2005, right? That this is an issue. Maybe we need to now consider, as you said, a research. Does the Ministry of Education have a research department that does that level of high quality study?
Sure, we've been making attempts to strengthen the research capacity. The challenge that we have is that often it's contract positions, and when you build capacity, person leave. We have the Division of Educational Research, and just yesterday, one of the young, brilliant persons who I work with indicated because of end of contract, she's gotten a job elsewhere. Okay. So that I think at the level of the ministry, there's still a need to expand and increase that research capacity. We've started this process previously with other officers where we were working in collaboration with UE, and contracts came to end, persons left, and we have to start all over again. So you need to strengthen the research capacity by having persons maybe on the establishment at the ministry, and also because of persons coming and going, that link with the tertiary level institution tends to lapse. So that I fully support the issue of the need for additional research, because education is dynamic and changes take place all the time, and we need to continue looking at the issue. So building research capacity at the ministry, one, and two, strengthening the connection with and research with the tertiary level institution will certainly help us to move closer to where we would like to be.
Okay, thanks so much, Senator Ahi.
I think we all agree that school is a very strong protective factor, as well as, families where there is some closeness to the student, so the student feels safe. And I have been really surprised. I was sitting in court one day, and some students came before the court. And they came from one particular school in the West. They call that school the Junior Sec College. I suppose you know what I'm talking about. Right, he knows. And I'm hearing them telling the magistrate that they've been out of school, suspended for 6 months, over a year. And I am saying this, I was actually holding for my daughter who does a lot of these juvenile matters. Prefer to call it child justice now. And I'm saying, how could you have a child out of school for that period of time? What is really happening? And the other thing that struck me is, respect to that same school, when a child was killed, here you're hearing all the newspaper reports about this coach that saw the problem and was trying to assist the child. And I'm saying, does this particular coach, it's all very well and good to have someone, you know, that you believe in, that you're close to help you, but why wasn't this child liaising with some social worker? This child is in with someone who is a gang member, and the coach is trying, and he is all in tears because he's failed. And I'm saying, where were the social workers in all of this? There was also a child who got killed in the central area, Caribbean, and you're hearing that this child was involved in gang for a long time, and the teachers knew that he, his parent was involved in activities like that. And I'm saying, people have this information, and they're keeping this information. And we have people who are qualified, and it's not being passed on for them, for their intervention. So I'm not sure about how close the teachers are working with the social workers, because there is no doubt in my mind that the social workers aren't enough in terms of their number for the amount of work that they have to do. There is a provision in the Children's Act that if there is a child, you know, is in danger, that you refer that child to the Children's Authority. There is something about moral endangerment, but somehow the society interprets moral endangerment as to if your mother is a prostitute. But they don't see it as if your father is a gang member, that you should be referred to the Children's Authority and be removed from that home. So we really need to have more education in terms of how we rescue children from dangerous futures so that we can help them. And we need to know what we are doing in schools. There are schools where children are not welcome, sir. And it really is very heartbreaking. Where you have a differential, a big differential in class, there are some children who come into the school from the lower socioeconomic bracket, and they are not made to feel welcome. They are bullied. And what happens is that they withdraw from the school. So we really need to look to see what we're doing with those children who have a potential for a bright future, but they are put into an environment where they are not made to feel at home, where they are humiliated, and we need to work to eradicate this from the society. Discrimination is alive and well in our schools, and we need to look at that in terms of children also who are dropping out of school. And discrimination not only at the level of their peers, but also at the levels of teachers who don't think that those children deserve to be there. And I make no apologies for saying that. It is a fact.
We're going to take our last question from MP4.
Well, I hope it will be one last question, but I'll be guided, Madam Chair. In your opening statement, Dr. Brunton, Roy Tech, trained teachers at early childhood centers and primary school levels, very low proportion of males entering the system. Then also from Dr. Rock at UTT, also mentioned that male to female teachers ratio should be more evenly distributed. And we have statistics provided and information from 3 entities that provided us information, right, which is UWI School of Education, who have made the statement, overall, teaching is an overwhelmingly female profession worldwide, right? And they have gone on to say that the statistics and the lowest they had throughout the period. We have the Catholic Religious Education Development Institution also making the statement that of 508 trainees enrolled, only 29 of them were male. Only 29. And then we have also, with regards, the Roy Tech statement, which stated that the proportion of male candidates enrolled in the B.Ed primary peaked in 2013 to 2014 with a 15%, right, of the candidates. And if we want to quote the number, it was 85 males out of 480 females with a total intake of 568. That was the highest in terms of individuals. And the lowest actually is in 2019-2020, which is present, where we have 7 males versus 44 females with a total intake of 51. So it means that, we are really, really in a bad state. Added to that, the early childhood centers, right? When you go to them, predominantly females. Primary schools, teachers, predominantly female teachers. We go to secondary, predominantly female teachers. Outside of that, extracurricular, you send your children to church. Female tutors at Sunday school at the various levels. Even at some homes, female, single parent, male father is no longer within the system. Right? I remember when I went to school, it was 90% of my teachers at Hillview College was male. 90%. There were 3 teachers, 4 teachers on staff at that time. And then I think when you look at most of those denominational schools, which are single sex, those male schools, again, subject to correction, are they predominantly male teachers? At those predominantly male teachers. So again, we need to look back at that pilot project, Ministry of Education, to see how that could be revived, to see what improvement can take place. But the question is, the dropouts. Form 3, 13 to 14 years on the average. Form 5, 16 to 17, 16 to 18 years on the average. What are the alternatives? Where are the youth camps today? Where is Chatham? Where is Shagaramas? Where is Presto? Right? There are some others that we can call. Where are those institutions? Right? Technical vocational schools or institutions, right? We have NESC, we have MIC, we have YTEP, we have CCS. Are they able to accommodate the amount of dropouts? What incentives are being put in place to ensure that those dropouts, we get some of them to fit into these various systems? Right? Those are things that we need to look at. Ministry of Education, Ministry of Sports, all this Ministry of Social Development, right? Is it time for a National Youth Service in Trinidad and Tobago? Those are the things that we have to start thinking about at this time, right? Because again, because they are dropping out, and we just, as the professor said and the doc said, they are just going into gangs. What are the alternatives, right? And it would be good, just to Madam Chair, again, to know, are we setting up tribunals, setting up committees, to look at those things. Those are the things fall in line with the Ministry of Education. And it's critical. We can't just say that they are dropping out and we are letting them, fall at the wayside. We need to look at because it was not always that way. As we say, 2013. Right?
Okay. Could we get a response from
Right. So, I think you raised some very critical issues in terms of the teaching profession and whether or not it really would have been beneficial to have representatives from tutor at this session today. So the numbers of males going into the teaching profession is woefully low, as you've indicated. I think there needs to be some sort of strategy at a national level to increase the reputation or the profession of teaching as being really professionals, so that teaching is not perceived as sort of a second option or as a stopgap or as a stepping stone to some other sort of profession. So that we need in probably several different methodologies to uplift the notion of what a teacher is, and I think to see it not just as a gendered profession, but as a profession that can attract males as well. And the reasons for this is still not quite clear, but indeed I think that it is definitely the case that introduction of more males into the teaching service can play a role in terms of providing male role models within the school system itself throughout, be it at the primary school level, early childhood care, and certainly at the secondary school level, where the dropout rate is indeed the highest. Now, in addition to that, the gender sensitization of teachers themselves, because if we can only do so much in terms of attracting males to the teaching profession, we need to ensure that female teachers are also aware of the challenges that male students face And the very same reasons that we have explored today, why are the young males dropping out of the education system, and how can there be a more targeted approach in terms of classroom management, a better understanding of childhood development, where in the process of a young boy becoming an adolescent, where is the, at what stage in their development would the intervention be more necessary, and what would be the type of teaching strategies that could be used in the classroom. So I think certainly the way in which the teaching profession has evolved, you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, in the region and globally, we need to pay a little closer attention to elevating the status of the teacher within the school system and certainly within the society as well.
Can we take a comment from UTT?
At UTT, we have on staff a member who was first diagnosed as dunce, stupid, not able to learn. He is now among us with his master's in music and teaching for years and doing successfully. He wrote a book recently and launched it. And in it, he detailed how the engagement of his mother, the parental involvement, and then the support that they receive, identifying on their own, and then finding the support to help them, so that in spite of the lack of a structure that would take people who have learning needs. When you see somebody who's blind, or you realize somebody is deaf, then you take measures. But there are people who are on the continuum between really not able and brilliant. Several of our students, and more so males, are in the systems. The teachers are able to detect it, but that's as far as it gets. They are undiagnosed and untreated. In this particular case, his mother got him diagnosed and treated, and he was able to succeed in spite of starting off with challenges. We have to pay particular attention to the individual child in front of us, and then diagnose and treat the problems. We have a tendency to just identify it, or if we identify it, we might diagnose it, but then we don't go further into treating with the problem. Everybody has a part to play in our society, and education should be for all. At the UTT, we are committed to education for all. We have people who are blind, people who are deaf, people in wheelchairs, and even those who would have started off with learning challenges. And in spite of, they are here with us and able to complete a university degree. We have to see each one of these children coming to school as an asset for future development. It means engaging. Not only is it the responsibility of the school, it is a responsibility of the entire society. I come back again to the media playing its role, not only for entertainment, but also for education. We have also to consider the role of the churches. We have also to consider the role of the other agencies that are responsible for discipline in our society. If we think that there's a lack of discipline in the schools, then they should also come in and help us with programs to encourage discipline that will get the school culture to a point where we can have learning taking place. Okay. Thank you.
Can we have Professor Delisle dealing with you can do your wrapping up statement as well, but also that issue of this male-female teacher ratio that we are observing.
So, as I said, all over the world, the numbers show that teaching is a female profession. That's not a bad thing. What is important, I think, in the Caribbean is that teachers have the values, skills, and knowledge that will help them to be effective with a diverse population across ethnicity and across the gender, and that's very critical. So in our teaching programs, certainly we need to look at that. In the past, we focus upon things like teacher expectations, teacher beliefs, self-fulfilling prophecies. The new psychology helps us to look at things like stereotype, threat. So we have to be very conscious of what teachers see, how they act, and how they are able to lessen gaps in general. Unfortunately, we live in a society where there is a lot of stereotyping. I don't know why, but teachers need to be above that. And so our training, in our curriculum renewal, we will need to look at that to generate the kind of empathy and the feeling that I see to some extent here that will help teachers be effective.
Thank you so much, and we're going to end with the comments of the Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Chair. We've noted the comments and the questions. I simply want to assure that the issue of male underachievement is one that we are seriously looking at within the Ministry of Education. Just a quick comment on the issue of the gender disparity in terms of teachers in the school system. I can tell you that it's one of the things that we are looking at in the ministry, and while we haven't made a decision in terms of how we proceed, I think I want to endorse the comments that Dr. Delisle made in terms of the reality is in the short term we may not be able to get equal number of male and female in the system. And I think in terms of going forward, and while we want to encourage males in the system, the issue of the teacher, the training, the ability to differentiate between issues that will reinforce some of the gender stereotypes and that teacher-student interaction and having the requisite skills and knowledge, I think is critical. And there has been arguments in terms of if we are saying that we need more males, then is it that female teachers are failing? And we know that many of the female teachers are in fact producing students who are doing exceedingly well. So that I think it's an issue that we need to look at, maybe do some more research. But we certainly, I think from a ministry perspective, would endorse having more males in the profession. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our officials again for being here with us. Especially, as I said, today, which is a very special day. And I want to just summarize some of our discussions and some of the findings and what we have said throughout our hearing. So, gender disparity has been acknowledged by the Ministry of Education since as far as 2005 in terms of performance of students. Both boys and girls are underperforming, but the percentage of boys that are underperforming is greater than the percentage of girls. As early as Standard 1, boys are falling behind girls in terms of their general performance. The management of schools seriously affects curriculum delivery, absenteeism and dropout rates, and that in turn affects the academic achievement of boys and girls, and so does untreated, undiagnosed learning disabilities. Pedagogy needs to be examined for its boy-friendliness. Gender-differentiated curriculum delivery is an important tool in delivery of the curriculum. Other countries in the region have interventions based on gender to improve the performance of boys. In Trinidad and Tobago, we would need to examine this approach for its effectiveness for us. Simply changing schools to same-sex did not result in improved performance for boys, and though this was piloted, other issues intervened which caused it to be discontinued, and we have asked for some data to look at in terms of what happened there. Parental involvement leads to increased performance across the board for students and must be encouraged. Curriculum expansion has been used as a strategy to increase engagement of boys in the education system according to international best practice. The impact of many factors such as family structure and socioeconomic background impact on young males, which in turn affects their performance and the attrition rate for males in the education system. The Ministry of Education must collaborate with tertiary institutions to incorporate their findings and their research into policy. This link must be formalized and fully developed for effectiveness. The Ministry of Education requires a robust, high-quality research department with dedicated staffing to procure data, which in turn will inform policy. There's a need for an incentive at the national level to improve the ratio of male to female teachers and to raise the profile of the teaching profession. And last but not least, there needs to be a whole-of-government approach to the issue of male and student underachievement and attrition, and the entire system needs to be activated to address this problem effectively and efficiently. I want to thank again our officials for being here, thank the members of the committee and our secretariat. I want to thank our viewing and listening audience, and I would now, at this point, like to declare our meeting adjourned.